She climbed into the back of a taxi just after midnight. 2 massive bags of fried chicken on her lap. Low-cut shirt in freezing cold weather. And the first thing she said to the driver was, *, go fast. Someone's chasing me. *. He floored it. But here's the thing that got under his skin the entire ride. She wasn't scared. She wasn't looking out the back window. She wasn't clutching those bags like someone running for her life. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, and started taking selfies on her phone, smirking, completely unbothered, like she was just catching a ride home from a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon. The driver kept checking his mirrors. Not for the person supposedly chasing her. He was checking her. Because nothing about this woman matched what she was saying. And everything about her made him deeply, inexplicably uncomfortable. He never figured out why. Not until weeks later, when he turned on the news and saw her face. That woman, the one with the fried chicken, the low-cut shirt, the selfie, and the smirk, was the newest serial killer in South Korea. And the internet had already decided she was too beautiful to go to prison. They were wrong about almost everything. Before we get to the bodies in the motel rooms, before we get to the 50 pills and the journal entries and the fake hangover drinks, you need to understand something about the world she was operating in. Because context matters here. A lot. South Korea right now has one of the most active, innovative, and frankly bizarre dating cultures on the planet. Young people in cities like Seoul are facing a social crisis. Meeting people is hard. Not just awkward first date hard. Structurally, institutionally hard. Because Korean society, particularly in professional and academic circles, comes loaded with hierarchy. When you meet someone for the first time in a formal context, within about 30 seconds you're expected to know their age, their job, their educational background, their family name. Who you are is inseparable from what you've achieved and who you know. It's suffocating for a lot of young people. So they found workarounds. Running clubs exploded across the country. Not serious marathon training running clubs. Social ones. Brand-sponsored ones. Groups of 20 and 30-somethings gathering at city parks in the freezing cold, splitting into teams, and chasing each other around like overgrown kids playing tag. No one asks what you do for a living. No one asks your GPA. You're just, are you a runner or are you a cop? Pick a side. Go. It sounds absurd, but it works. Hundreds of thousands of posts on Instagram. Lines around the block on cold Tuesday nights. And then there are the hunting bars. The hunting bar is exactly what it sounds like. A venue specifically engineered for strangers to meet other strangers with romantic intent. Tables arranged in a wide ring around a dance floor. Singles circulate freely. You walk up to a table, you ask to join, sometimes you pay for a round of drinks, sometimes they pay for yours, and then the night unfolds from there. Nobody's being weird about it. Nobody's judging. That's the whole point. It's dating with the social friction removed. Speed dating without the timer. Tinder, but in person with soju. It was a beautiful idea, honestly, until it wasn't. There's a group of men. They don't know each other. They live in different parts of the city, work in different industries, move in completely different social circles. But they all share one thing. They all went to one of the local hunting bars in Seoul over a span of several months. And every single one of them ended up on a date that left them feeling like they'd stepped into a slow-motion psychological fever dream. We're going to call them by fake names because every single one of these men has kept their identity private, even in Korean media. Adam was the first to come forward with his story. He took a 22-year-old woman out for a full evening. Dinner, drinks, the whole thing. He spent the equivalent of over $200. Not unusual for a first date in Seoul. What was unusual was that she never once said thank you. Not once. Not even a polite nod at the end. And the entire time, she was texting another man under the table. He watched it happen. He kept paying. He doesn't know why. Ben's experience was stranger in a different way. His date presented herself as 25 years old. But when she showed up, she looked younger. Not underage, just noticeably younger than she'd claimed. Which confused him because in Korean culture, being taller and older as a woman is generally considered attractive and desirable. So why lie about it? And then the whole night became one long stream of lies. She lied about her height, standing directly in front of him, claiming to be 5'4" when she was visibly 5'7" or 8. She lied about where she'd worked. She lied about where she'd grown up. None of it made narrative sense. The lies didn't serve any obvious purpose. She was just lying constantly, reflexively, about things that didn't even matter. And she had this completely blank, unshaking delivery when she did it. No flinching. No tells. Like she'd been doing it her whole life. She also ordered the most expensive things on the menu, didn't finish any of them, then kept adding new items. And she showed up in extremely revealing clothing despite it being bitterly cold outside. When Ben finally reached over to zip her jacket closed, just trying to be considerate, just not wanting to watch her shiver, she immediately yanked it back open, all the way down, and stared at him like he'd crossed a line. He went home completely bewildered. Ethan met a woman through one of the hunting bars, and after a few rounds of texting, she suggested a romantic day trip to a nearby beach. When they got there, she announced she had no money. None. He covered everything. Food, drinks, all of it. But at the convenience store on the way back, she started dropping items into the basket that had nothing to do with the beach trip. Laundry detergent, vitamins, feminine hygiene products, skincare, lip balm. She just kept adding things and then looked at him expectantly when they got to the register. He paid. Then she came over to his place for dinner. When she left, he noticed two things were gone: a baseball cap and a Starbucks gift card with about $30 on it. He texted her asking if she'd accidentally taken them. She blocked him immediately. A guy named Kong had a date that somehow ended up at a walk-in clinic. They were barely 2 hours in when she started coughing dramatically and grabbing her chest. He took her in, waited while she was seen, paid for her prescription, which in Korea costs next to nothing, and then watched in disbelief as she tried to add $60-something worth of vitamins, herbal supplements, and tampons to the pharmacy run. When he said no, she stormed out, taking the prescription he'd already paid for. And somehow he was the one who felt bad about it. Frank left his wallet on the restaurant table when he went to the bathroom. In Seoul, this is completely normal. The country has one of the lowest petty crime rates on earth. You claim a table at a restaurant by putting your phone and wallet on it. Nobody touches it. It's just how things work. He came back to an empty wallet. Not a missing credit card, those were still there. Just every single bill gone. He asked his date. She said she had no idea what he was talking about. He pulled up the restaurant's security footage right there at the table. It showed her reaching into his wallet while he was in the bathroom and pocketing the cash. Here's the part that made people's skin crawl when he told this story later. She watched the footage with him, watched herself on the screen, clear as day, taking the money. And then she just looked at him, flat, unblinking. So what are you going to do about it? She returned the cash and walked out like he was the problem. And then there's Patrick, who should have known something was off when the very first text she ever sent him was a list of restaurants she liked. Every single one of them at the highest price tier. She sent him detailed descriptions of all the meats she loved, because meat in Korea is expensive and she wanted him to know she wanted the good stuff. On their first actual date, they had 2 full meals back to back, and when they were wrapping up, she asked him to also buy her a hamburger and some bread to take home. Patrick also noticed something that bothered him on a different level. They'd been out together for most of the day. Many hours. Multiple meals. And she never once used a bathroom. Not once. He'd gone to the restroom multiple times. When he finally pointed it out, she immediately said, "Oh, weird. I should go," and disappeared to the bathroom for a moment. Like a switch had been flipped. He didn't know what to make of it. None of these men knew each other. They weren't comparing notes. They were just individually sitting with this creeping unease, trying to figure out what had happened to them. And then the news broke. Every single one of them had been on a date with the same woman. And she wasn't just a bad date. She was about to become one of the most talked about criminal cases in South Korean history. Her name was Kim Ho-yeon. She was 20 years old. And right before the police started connecting the dots, she was sitting in the back of a taxi, fried chicken in her lap, telling a driver to floor it because someone was chasing her. Nobody was chasing her. She had just left a man dying in a motel room. The first body was found by motel staff in Seoul during a routine checkout check. A young man in his 20s, lying rigid on his side in the bed. No obvious signs of trauma. No wounds. No evidence of a struggle. The room looked completely undisturbed. Just a man, stone still, and a bottle of hangover recovery drink on the nightstand. Those drinks are everywhere in Korea. You buy them at any convenience store. They're marketed as helping your body process alcohol faster. Most Koreans keep one in their bag on a night out. The motel staff told police a woman had checked in with him the night before. They'd seemed like a normal couple. Not particularly drunk. Not particularly loud. And then, maybe 10 minutes after a fried chicken delivery arrived, the woman left alone. With the bags. Police checked his phone. There was an unread message from a woman. A very long, very detailed, very strange message. It read like minutes from a business meeting. She explained step by step why she'd left. She'd gotten her period unexpectedly and couldn't sleep. He'd already given her cash for a taxi. The fried chicken had arrived while he was asleep. She tried to wake him, but he seemed tired and said to eat without him. She'd felt lonely eating alone while he slept, so she took the food home. She promised to return the photo booth pictures that had been folded inside the wad of cash he'd given her. Investigators didn't need a criminology degree to recognize what that message was. It wasn't a text from a girl who'd left a sleeping date. It was a cover story, typed up carefully and sent so it would sit there waiting, time-stamped, in case anyone ever checked his phone. The toxicology report came back and confirmed what the careful staging had been designed to hide. This man had been given approximately 50 pills across multiple drug categories. 3 types of antidepressants. Sleeping pills, a benzodiazepine sedative, a cardiovascular medication, antihistamines, Tylenol. None of these drugs had been prescribed to him. He had no history of depression, no sleep disorder, no legitimate medical reason to have any of these substances in his body. And the concentrations weren't recreational. This wasn't someone who'd experimented with the wrong combination at a party. This was a pharmaceutical execution. 11 days later, a second man was found dead in a different motel room. Same neighborhood. Same pattern. Young guy in his 20s. No signs of violence. Heavily drugged. Motel staff reported he'd checked in with a woman who left not long after a food delivery arrived. 2 murders. 11 days apart. The same method. The same staging. The same woman visible on CCTV footage at both locations. Police identified her quickly, and then made a decision they would later have to answer for. Rather than bringing her in immediately, they called her and scheduled a voluntary interview. During the gap between that phone call and the scheduled interview date, she poisoned a third man. He survived, barely. He spent 2 days in a hospital unconscious. His doctors told his mother twice that he might not regain consciousness. He woke up, grabbed his phone, and texted her asking what she had put in that drink. She never responded. But investigators, once they connected him to the case, asked him to look at the motel CCTV footage. "That's my girlfriend," he said. Ex-girlfriend, he corrected himself. 20-year-old Kim Hoyeon. She wasn't hard to find. She wasn't hiding. She had posted a selfie on Instagram 30 minutes before police arrived at her door. When they brought her in for questioning, she was remarkably calm. She didn't deny giving the men drugs. She explained herself in a way that was designed to sound reasonable, even sympathetic. She said she was conflict-averse. She said the men had spent money on her and she assumed they expected something physical in return, and rather than deal with that confrontation, she would simply put them to sleep. She said she had no idea anyone would die. She took these same medications herself for PTSD. They were just supposed to knock the men out long enough for her to leave. 2 of them happened to die. That's how she phrased it. Happened to die. The investigators sat with that for a moment. Then they started pulling everything else together. Her phone search history from the weeks leading up to the killings included questions like, "What is a lethal overdose of sleeping pills?" And, "If you drink alcohol while taking sleeping pills, can it kill you?" ChatGPT had responded clearly. Yes. A combination like that in high doses is fatal. She'd taken notes. Her journal, recovered from her apartment, contained entries from each incident. Short, clinical observations about dosage and effect. After one man survived, she wrote that the dose hadn't been strong enough. He'd woken up and become, in her words, more of a nuisance. She noted she needed to increase the concentration next time. The investigators also discovered that she wasn't just crushing up her own prescribed medication. She'd been engaging in what's called medical shopping, visiting multiple psychiatric clinics across the city, obtaining separate prescriptions from each, picking them up at different pharmacies so no single provider would notice the volume she was accumulating. She'd built up a substantial pharmaceutical stockpile over months, and her method wasn't improvised. Before each date, she'd prepare a hangover drink with the crushed pills dissolved into it. She brought 2 bottles every time. One spiked, one clean. She'd give the spiked one to her date and leave the clean one on the nightstand. When police found the clean bottle and tested it, it came back negative. She had thought that through. She had planned for the investigation that would follow. But here's the detail that cuts through every argument about conflict avoidance and trauma and just wanting to go home. She was the one who pushed for motel rooms. Every time. Text messages recovered from her phone showed her repeatedly steering conversations toward getting a motel, framing it as a practical necessity, citing restaurants that were delivery only, suggesting it casually, circling back to it when the men didn't pick up on the first suggestion. She wasn't being lured. She was the one setting the destination. And in the case of her second victim, she used his credit card while he was dying in the bed beside her to order the fried chicken. She ordered 22 items. She waited for the delivery in that room. When the delivery driver arrived and knocked, she opened the door with the blonkiest expression he'd ever seen on a person. Not sad, not excited, not anything. Just empty. She took the bags and closed the door. Her second victim was still alive on that bed while she waited for her food. When South Korean police officially labeled her a serial killer, the internet exploded. But not in the direction anyone expected. Her Instagram profile had already been found and shared across forums before her name was officially released. And the response from a substantial portion of online commenters, particularly men, was not horror. It was fascination, infatuation, people calling her the prettiest killer alive. Men in comment sections offering to fix her, offering to be her pen pal, suggesting that if she got life in prison, at least she'd be a loyal correspondent who couldn't cheat. One post went viral. A man asking seriously whether it would be so wrong to write letters to the motel killer because she was attractive and people that pretty are usually out of his league and at least she couldn't go anywhere. The families of the victims were watching all of this in real time. The investigators, growing frustrated, decided to release her name, age, and official mugshot photos. They hoped it would redirect public sentiment toward what had actually happened to 2 young men who were now dead. The internet went silent for a moment, and then pivoted completely, because Kim Hoi-yeon looked dramatically different in her mugshot than she did in her heavily filtered, top-down angled, cleavage-forward Instagram selfies. And commenters who had been calling her the prettiest killer alive were now expressing feelings of betrayal. Someone wrote that the photo editing required to produce her Instagram pictures would bankrupt artificial intelligence. Others said they'd been completely deceived and were taking back everything they'd said. A subset of male netizens actually created a ranking, a ranked list of recent female killers in South Korea, comparing their Instagram photos to their mugshots. Kim Hoi-yeon landed, by their assessment, toward the bottom. The victims' families watched this too. One of the more chilling observations that emerged from the online community during this period was a look through her Instagram profile as a whole. Hundreds of posts, dozens of selfies, and not a single other person in any of them. Not one photo with a friend, a sibling, a coworker. No group shots with a face blurred out. No tagged memories from holidays. Just her, alone, looking into the camera with an expression designed to attract followers. People noted it felt sad. Then they noted it felt like something else entirely. There is a legal standard in South Korea for publicly disclosing the identity of a criminal suspect. The crime has to meet multiple thresholds: significant public harm, sufficient evidence, and crucially, the method of the crime must be classified as brutal. The prosecutors initially declined to release her information, arguing that death by overdose while unconscious didn't clear the brutality bar. The backlash from the public and from both victims' families was immediate and volcanic. 2 men were dead. A third had barely survived. The woman responsible had been methodically drugging date after date for months, adjusting her dosages, keeping notes, leaving decoy evidence. And the discussion online was about her cheekbones. Under that pressure, the decision was reversed. Her identity was disclosed. And then she started writing letters from detention. The letters are something else. She sent them to a journalist, begging for them to be published. And the journalist did publish them. And they read like something produced by a person who has spent their whole life using emotional performance as a tool and has run out of tools. She wrote about every childhood accident she'd survived. The time she fell in the ocean as a small child. The time she choked on candy. The time her father threw a knife at her. Each one framed as, I should have just died then. None of this would have happened. Everyone would be better off. Cycling through tragedy after tragedy as though assembling a case for her own victimhood. Cataloging near-deaths she was now retroactively annoyed to have survived. Her father was genuinely violent. There's documentation of that. He would come home drunk. He abused her mother. The household was chaotic and terrifying. She was diagnosed with PTSD. Her mother worked overnight shifts to keep the family afloat after he left. The trauma she describes appears to be real, and it changes nothing about what she did to those men. The letters kept coming. She wrote about missing her mother's cooking, about being frightened, about nobody being on her side, about detention center food being substandard, about wishing the media would stop covering her case because the coverage could, in her words, kill suspects. She pivoted between tones mid-letter, mournful, then demanding, then self-pitying, then weirdly policy-oriented, suggesting that mental health counseling in detention facilities should be expanded. She asked the journalist in one letter whether she thought she might be a psychopath. Then, in a follow-up, provided her own answer to that question by listing all the reasons she wasn't one. Even people who'd initially wanted to defend her had largely stopped by this point. A commenter summarized it well. With this particular type of person, the only truthful thing that comes out of their mouth is the air they're breathing. Let's talk about what the investigation actually pieced together about her behavior across those 4 months. October. A man named by investigators only as H collapsed in a Gangnam restaurant while drinking white wine with Hoi-yeon. She called emergency services. He was just drinking wine and suddenly passed out, she said. Come quickly. Staff recalled that she hadn't seemed distressed. The man had been slumped over for 30 minutes before she'd done anything about it. When asked if he was her boyfriend, she said they'd only been dating 2 days. She barely knew his tolerance. The server checked the tab. 2 glasses of wine had been ordered. The man's glass was still mostly full. December. She was in a bakery parking lot with the man who would become her identified survivor. She gave him a bottle of herbal medicine for fatigue, something she'd allegedly mentioned in their texts prior to the date. He drank it. He woke up in a hospital 2 days later with his mother standing over him. She'd been there the whole time he was unconscious, playing the attentive girlfriend. When she got home that night, she wrote in her journal. The dose hadn't killed him. He'd woken up. She noted this as a problem requiring adjustment. January. Karaoke bar. Private room. Man collapses. She tries to leave without him. The venue has a policy, you can't abandon your companions. She rolled her eyes, called emergency dispatch, reported him as too drunk to wake up. When paramedics checked, he had almost nothing in his system as far as alcohol went. But the pharmaceutical cocktail was there. February. First confirmed death. Motel room. Fried chicken delivery. Long explanatory text message sent to a phone that would never be checked by its owner again. February 11 days later. Second confirmed death. Same pattern. Different neighborhood. Same woman walking out of the motel with 2 bags of fried chicken less than 10 minutes after the delivery arrived. The chef who had been saving up to open his own restaurant. The man who'd looked up how to make conversation on a first date because he was nervous and hopeful. He'd been thinking about marriage. He'd been cautious and careful and optimistic about the future. He never got to eat his fried chicken. The question everyone keeps circling back to is motive. And it's genuinely puzzling. Because if you strip away everything and ask what she actually got out of this, the answer is some cash, some stolen items, hundreds of dollars in free meals, a few hats and gift cards and men's clothing she later sold for $20 apiece on a second-hand app. Experts who analyzed the case suggested something more disturbing than greed. They said she treated the men as subjects in an ongoing experiment, not as people. The food obsession, the stealing, the lies, the escalating drug dosages, all of it was an exercise in control. She wasn't taking from them out of desperation. She was taking because she could, and because the act of making someone helpless and then walking away, full of their food, carrying their cash, leaving them wherever she left them, was the point. The theft was almost incidental. The pharmacological shutdown was the behavior she was refining. The notes, the dosage adjustments, the dual-bottle decoy system, the practice runs that kept failing because the men kept waking up. A woman who grew up in a house where she had no control over anything, where her father made the rules and the rules were violence and fear, where her mother blocked the bedroom door with her body all night, where the only predictable thing was unpredictability. She found somewhere along the way that she could control this, that she could make a man fall down with something dissolved in a drink, that she could sit there and watch it happen and feel something close to power, and then she could order the food she wanted and eat it alone in the dark and walk out whenever she was ready. That is not a woman trying to avoid confrontation. That is not someone who got into a bad situation and panicked. That is someone who found something that worked and kept doing it until the dosages were high enough to kill. The trial is underway. She faces 2 counts of murder, aggravated assault for the survivor cases, and narcotics violations. Her defense has leaned heavily on her trauma history and the argument that she didn't intend fatal outcomes, that she was genuinely afraid, genuinely trying only to sedate. Prosecutors have submitted her ChatGPT search history, the AI's explicit answers to her explicit questions about what happens when you combine sleeping pills and alcohol in high quantities, the journal entries about dosage escalation, the decoy bottles she prepared before each date. The second victim's family has spoken publicly about watching internet commenters debate her appearance while their son was in the ground. Inside detention, she's reportedly told a fellow inmate she's scared of being called a psychopath. She's also told them the prison food isn't very good. Sometimes she eats it, sometimes she doesn't. And here's the thing that will follow this case long after the verdict comes down. Not the murders themselves, terrible as they are. It's the speed with which a significant portion of the public defaulted to making her attractiveness the central fact of the story. 2 young men were dead. Another barely made it. And the dominant conversation in the early days was whether she was too pretty for prison. One of those men had been nervously Googling first date conversation tips the same night she was researching lethal pharmaceutical dosages on the same platform. He thought he was going on a date. He thought he was going to impress someone. He thought maybe this was the start of something. The taxi driver who picked her up that night will probably always remember it. The cold air when she slid in. The weight of those bags. The way she leaned back and exhaled, completely at ease. The smirk while she typed. The faint absurdity of the fried chicken smell filling his car while she told him someone was chasing her. Nobody was chasing her. She was already gone.